Yep.
So for those people in this room who don't have context for John and Julie Gottman and the work that you do, can you kind of summarize your work and why it's so important?
You bet. So, before John started doing his research, which was about 40, 45 years ago, nobody knew what kept couples together. Nobody had any idea of the difference between couples who stayed together and those who ended up separating or divorcing. So, John did this incredible research, step by step by step, to determine what predicted whether couples stay together happily, unhappily, or ended up separating and divorcing. And what he found was that he could predict with over 90% accuracy based on around 15 minutes, what would happen to a couple 6 years down the road. And what that meant is that we never got invited to dinner anymore. So, yeah, you get it? You guys can invite us though, right? So, okay. So then what happened is that I was busy doing my own practice, private practice, working with very distressed people, very difficult people. But every night over dinner, we would talk about either my cases or his research, and we found that we really, really wanted together to help people. So we started the Gottman Institute about 23 years ago, and we put our heads together to create interventions that would really duplicate what the successful couples were doing to keep their relationships happy and united and together and romantic. What did they do? Well, we certainly didn't have the answers. TV didn't have the answers, but the couples that came into our lab had the answers. So we generalized from what they did, created exercises and interventions and theory, and started giving workshops both for couples like you guys and for clinicians to train clinicians who worked with distressed couples how to really help them succeed. And as a result, the success rate for couples therapy on average from about 17% success to 75% successful. So, yay, it's good. And then we started specializing in working with couples where there were affairs and where there was trauma, where there was addiction, all kinds of, some even domestic violence. So it's been a fabulous ride. It's really been fun.
It always amazes me. One of the things that you talk about a lot is how important it is for a couple to have a shared dream and shared goals. And to me, I love that you practice what you preach, because I see what you have done together as a couple that I don't think you would have been able to do individually, and how big of an impact it's had on the world. Do you ever stop to think about that, or do you just keep moving forward?
No, we just keep moving forward.
I love that. I love that. Will you tell me a little bit about why it is important to have a shared dream?
Oh, God. I'll tell you why. How many of you have hearts that are beating inside of your chest? How many of you have some soul in there, right? Well, human beings are meaning makers. They make meaning. And that's right, they're storytellers. So part of making meaning is dreaming about what is possible. We've always been explorers as human beings and adventurers, and so when you dream together with a partner, you're no longer alone in pursuing something that has deep, profound meaning for you, which gives you a reason to live and move forward.
Yes, I love that. One of the things that you mentioned earlier that really hit home with me is how important research is in your work, not speculation. John, can you talk a little bit about why research is so important in a field like this?
Well, it's interesting, because when Bob Levinson and I started doing this research about 45 years we were basically two clueless guys. We we went from one disastrous relationship with a woman to another, you know, and so we didn't really know anything. But there were all these books out there written by therapists suggesting what went wrong in relationships. And it's turned out that most of them are not right. In fact, some of them are 180 degrees wrong. And so I've kept track of my hypotheses, and I'm 60% wrong. So, you know, I'm not that smart, right? It's really the data that inform us.
Is that just on the research, or is that across the board?
Well, you know, at home I'm wrong a lot more than 60% of the time.
According to whom?
You.
Oh.
Awesome. So,
you know, if we didn't do the research, you know, we would think we were right 100% of the time. You know, and there are a lot of people writing books out there, you know, just using their imagination. And very smart people have been completely wrong. So, you know, Bob and I are wrong a lot. So when we analyze the data are telling us this is what nature is. This is the nature of relationships. So really, we're not that smart. We know how to do research, but it's really the couples who come into the lab who are smart. So we're learning from them. You know, basically research is plagiarizing from smart people what they know, you know. And there are all these people out there who really know how to have great relationships. And so that's where we learn that dreams are so important. In fact, most of the conflicts that people have are really about meaning. For example, why do people fight about money? Why do they have conflict about money? Money is just arithmetic, right? There should be more money coming in than you're spending, right? So why should you fight about money? Well, most fights about money are really about the meaning of money. And it can mean freedom, it can mean power, it can mean love and caring, it can mean justice. And, you know, I analyzed 935 arguments about money in our lab. And I stopped at 100 meanings of money. And so when you get down to why is money important? What's your history with money? What's your family's history with money? Then suddenly these arguments about money become about what money should mean to us, what's enough money, you know. And then suddenly these conflicts become ways of getting closer to one another and understanding each other better.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. You mentioned that you know, all this research this is what your life is based around, and you've written some amazing books, many of which have been read by people in the audience. And now you've written this new 8 Dates book. Why, Julie, can you talk a little bit about why 8 Dates is important now, and why you felt compelled to write that book?
Okay, so let me ask the audience something. How many of you are in relationships where both people are working outside the home? Raise your hands.
It's a decent percent.
Okay.
I can't see the balcony very well, but...
Yeah, well, you know, what we found with a lot of couples is that many people are so busy raising kids or working and raising kids, working inside the home, outside the home. We live in an incredibly stressful culture, people. You probably may know that by now. And as a result, people don't make the time to connect with one another. They don't have the time, right? And so when you're together over time, each individual evolves. People change. They change their needs, their values, their spirituality. They may change their preferences. And are they communicating those changes to their partner? Well, maybe not. And as a result, there are many couples who find themselves after 5 years, 10 years, 20 years on opposite sides of a room, and they have no idea what to talk about. They don't know who they're facing. The face looks familiar, but they don't know the internal landscape of that individual. And so we wanted to give those couples, as well as couples who were just getting together for the first time and having those horrible, nervous, awkward conversations where you giggle like 80% of the time and then later on you feel embarrassed. You know, it's like, what was I thinking? What was I giggling about? So those couples don't know what to talk about either, right? So we wanted to create from what couples really love to talk about and need to talk about, want to talk about, a way for couples to connect that would be fun, that would not create conflict, that would be real explorations, that would kindle that curiosity that most of us have about each other when we first meet up, but then after a while we're not quite sure what to talk about. So these dates we planned out for the activities in them, and the biggest piece were the questions to address one another, the reflection, and the ways that those really helped people know and understand each other at a much deeper level.
Great.
So we got 300 couples, gay and lesbian and heterosexual couples, to agree to go on the dates and tape record the dates. And so, you know, I got to listen to 2,100 dates.
Oh my gosh.
You know, it was
That's so many dates.
2,400 right now.
This guy is a mathematician? What?
Hey, your idea of a good time and my idea of a good time sound like they're very different ideas. That's so many conversations to listen to.
So, you know, I also started collecting disastrous dates on YouTube.
Okay, that sounds like something I would enjoy.
So, I noticed that people on YouTube, a lot of times, when they go out on a date, they're so nervous that they drink before the date, and then they drink during the date. And they're like passing ships in the night. You know, one person says something and the other person says something on a completely different topic.
It's like two separate monologues happening at the same time.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
You know, so here are these, 2,400 dates, I got to listen to. You know, you could really fine-tune the dates. And these couples were kind enough to do these webinars with us. So we, the four authors could talk to them and say, so how did that work? And we had two dates that were real duds that couples didn't like at all. And we could change the dates to make it even better. And the couples helped us to develop them. So all these dates are field tested.
I love it. I was wondering if it started out with 8 dates in your mind or if they got narrowed down. It sounds like they got narrowed down.
And we started with 10 dates.
Started out with 10.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
2 of them were no good.
We thought they were great.
That's better than your 60% odds, though. You got 80.
Right.
80 good, or 8 out of 10. That's great.
8 out of 10.
Do either of you have a favorite date from the book?
Yeah, we each do, I think. My favorite date is the date on dreams. Speaking of which, that's what you brought up. I tend to be a big dreamer, and dreams as in, what do you want to do, I tend to be very exploratory. I love to do really, really crazy stuff, like go to Antarctica and go to Mount Everest and things like that. So I love to have those dreams and share those dreams with John. And his dream is to sit in his recliner and study mathematics. And so, there's a few little differences. Here's a really important fact, people. You don't have to be compatible to have a good marriage or relationship. Yes. So, I can go to Antarctica and he can sit and read math, and it's perfect. It works.
Well, I'm not an athlete, but I do have a lever on the chair that gets challenging every now and then.
So that date on dreams is really, it's just so wonderful because, you get to open up your landscape. I used to have an image after I finished graduate school. I had this image of myself. I had no idea where I was going to live, what I was going to do. And I imagined myself on the lip of this huge canyon, this gigantic canyon. And I was just going to sail right off, and I had no idea where I was going. But it was so wonderful to imagine the entire landscape, even things that seem impossible. And that's what I love sharing with you. Yeah, and you sharing
Differential equation.
math with me.
Non-linear differential equation is very beautiful.
Apparently so.
Julie, do you think people stop dreaming at some point in their life? Is that why this is kind of an important date? Is because a lot of people stop dreaming?
Yeah, they really do. And their life very often in the United States devolves to this very long to-do list. And they're great partners, they raise kids together and they clean the house and they do a lot of stuff to manage the relationship, but rarely take time to really sit down and ask questions like, so how do you like the way we're living? What do you want to change? Use your microphone when you speak.
Okay.
And, how do you like your job? What do you want our life to be like 5 years from now?
Yeah.
Things like that. So to take that time to really ask those questions is really important for keeping love alive, keeping curiosity alive, as Julie said.
I love that.
Yeah.
Those are important conversations to have, and I think sometimes they're hard conversations to have. It's hard to say, like, we're not where we want to be right now, and sometimes hard to hear that, too, I think. John, what's your favorite date?
Well, I have two. One of my favorites is about sex.
Of course.
Go on.
That's my boy.
So, that's got it. Those are fun conversations to have. Do you really know, what turns your partner on? Do you really know, what has been great lovemaking in your history? And, and how to keep that alive. And I think that's an important conversation to have. And one of my favorite research studies was just recently done on 70,000 people in 24 countries. Had one question, which was, what's different about people who say they have a great sex life and people who say their sex life is not very good? How are they different? And it turns out, those differences are the same in China, Brazil, Spain, Italy, Canada, even parts of New Jersey.
You're not from New Jersey, right?
But, and they're not so much about what people do in the bedroom. There are things like, they tell each other, people have a great sex life, say I love you every day and mean it. They kiss one another passionately for no reason at all. They give compliments. They have weekly romantic dates. They take romantic vacations. They cuddle. Use your microphone.
I was just reminding you, sweetie.
Yeah, right. They cuddle. So I thought that was really great. Julie and I have a cuddle couch. And, we, after we have dinner, we get on our cuddle couch and we watch English people getting murdered. we really enjoy that,
My wife and I get on our cuddle couch and we watch English people bake bread.
In Britain.
Yes.
Yeah.
I knew it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
My other favorite date is the one on trust and commitment, which turned out to be such a powerful date for people to talk about. How did your parents show one another that they were trustworthy, or how did they fail to do that? How did they show one another they were committed, or how did they fail to do that? How do we do that in our relationship? That turned out to be actually our most emotionally evocative date.
Wow.
Very powerful.
Why is trust so important?
It's really interesting because
Just to set you up there.
all the arguments that the couples, 130 newlywed couples came to our apartment lab, and all of their arguments were about trust. Are you going to be there for me? Do you have my back? Am I more important than your mother? Am I more important than your friends? What if this happens? Will you be faithful to me? Will I always be the love of your life? What is it that you love about me? Those kinds of things that people need so much reassurance, that they are lovable.
Yeah, let me add to that. Biologically, we are pack animals. We always have been through evolution. We are pack animals. We have to lean on each other in order to survive. We have to be dependent on one another, interdependent on one another. And so, over time, we have created this way of relating to one another where we open ourselves with vulnerability in order to create the bonds of interdependence with one another. And of course, we're going to hurt each other every now and then, and it's very important that we repair those hurts. But we build trust through having the courage to be vulnerable with one another, be interdependent with one another, and through that, we flourish. That's how we are hardwired. That's how we are built. We do not survive alone, not easily. So trust is all part of that. It's the glue that keeps us together.
And trust is a major issue, probably the major issue facing our country now, because most Americans don't trust our government, we don't trust our Congress, we don't trust, the Senate, we don't trust our presidents, we don't trust politicians.
We don't
really
trust
have
the
our
media.
back,
Yeah.
So, and
We got to trust each other.
yeah, trust each other. So, there are places in the United States where people really don't trust their neighbors, and other places that build community and build a sense of trust. And, I'm sure Salt Lake City is an example of where people work to build community. There are places in the United States where that's not the case. Baltimore is a good example, and those cities aren't safe, and kids aren't learning as well in places in the country where there's not that trust and that community building. There's less participation, fewer people vote, people are not as healthy, they die younger. So trust is really a major issue, I think.
All these things that you're saying about trust remind me of a quote that I think we have printed outside on one of the signs for this event. And it says, "It's the small things done often that make the difference."
Right.
Talk to me about the small things that make the difference. I think a lot of people think that a grandiose gesture is what helps keep a relationship together, or the anniversary or the honeymoon every year, something like that. Why are small things the real important thing?
Well, one thing we noticed in our apartment lab, where there was very small moments where one person would try to connect with their partner, try to get their attention, tell a joke, get their partner's interest, try to, be affectionate. And the response of the person in those moments was so critical. Whether they turned toward their partner and said, "I'm right here, what do you need, baby?" Or whether they were distracted, or not interested, didn't respond. Or they were critical and irritable, when their partner said, "Oh, look at that, that's really so interesting." Say, "Will you leave me alone? I'm trying to read. Be quiet, And so, when we followed these couples, these really good couples, 6 years after the wedding, we looked at couples who divorced, and we looked back at 6 years earlier. How often did they turn toward their partner in these small moments when their partner's trying to get their interest or talk to them about something important? And the people who divorced 6 years earlier had only turned toward their partner 33% of the time. And the people who are still married 6 years earlier had turned toward their partner 86% of the time. So these very small moments where you say, "Thanks for getting the butter." I really enjoyed the conversation at dinner, where you're communicating affection and respect to your partner, are really critical at building kind of an emotional bank account in the relationship that builds security.
The numbers don't lie. Thanks for coming to date night. That's a good thing to say to your partner tonight. Now, Julie, you were talking earlier about how we're pack animals, and kind of how that's innate in us as human beings. I'm curious, what is it that we can what is it we can learn by being in a relationship about ourselves that we can't really learn without being in a relationship? Is there something that you can think of that we can learn being part of a couple?
That's an interesting question. Well, we can learn the value of patience.
What do you mean?
She requires a lot being married to me.
You can learn, you learn, God, it's a beautiful thing. You learn how to harmonize. That's what you learn. You learn how to harmonize. So what that means is, let's say your partner is in a really bad mood one day, and you can choose to take that personally, or you can think to yourself, God, I wonder if they had a really bad night's sleep. So you check with them, how did they sleep last night? Well, maybe they didn't sleep so well. So then you move in to, how can I support you? What can I do? How can I help you? So you learn how to give in a relationship that you don't learn without one. You learn how to give not because you're going to get something back, but for the pure joy of your partner's smile, your partner's laughter, your partner's appreciation. You learn how to give. And the other thing too is you learn how to receive. A lot of us are very wary about receiving. We're afraid to receive, right? And so we don't want to receive because that means we're needy, that horrible word, which it ought to be eliminated from the English vocabulary. So we learn how to receive. We learn how to take in love, take in compliments. That's something I've had to work on all my life. How to be taken care of. Wow. That's a great lesson. Most of us didn't have perfect parenting, and so we get some of that healing love from a partner that maybe we didn't get growing up. That's a great gift. So we learn how to share our soul. We learn how to be vulnerable. We learn how to share our spirit with somebody, how to share our pain with somebody. I mean, it's fabulous.
I'm going to give you a round of applause for that one. I got emotional listening to you give that answer. I don't know if you noticed.
I did.
I'm
a therapist. I got it.
Yes, that's what you do. I just started thinking how much I love the lessons that I have gotten from being married to my wife.
Oh.
And
can you share a little bit with us?
Patience. I didn't realize how much patience was required to be with somebody like me until I lived with, until I got with my wife, and every morning I wake up and I just go, oh my gosh, I'm glad she's still here. I don't know how.
I feel that way too.
Yeah, but you just articulated very beautifully a lot of the experiences that I've been having recently. Just being grateful as my wife is patient while I wrestle with with some of my own weaknesses and struggles, and being willing to accept me as an imperfect human being. And I think that's like one of the most magical things about love, is that we're all so imperfect, and yet somehow we can find a way to make this work. It really is a miracle. Every time somebody falls in love and stays in love and puts in that effort, I honestly think it's a miracle.
Nate, you're bringing up something really wonderful, in addition to the things I was saying, which is you learn gratitude.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a marriage dies without gratitude.
For sure.
For sure. John, can I make a weird segue? I heard about some research that you mentioned in another interview recently, and I thought it was fascinating, and I was wondering if you could share some of it with the audience here. You mentioned that you can predict the quality of a marriage by testing the urine of a child.
What?
Yeah, just buckle up. Then I heard this and I was like, what? This is amazing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So we did a study, we did a series of studies looking at how children influence relationships, how babies influence relationships, how children are influenced by relationships also. We followed kids from infancy through teenage years. And when we were studying 4 and 5-year-old kids, and we studied them up until age 8, one of the ideas was to look at the endocrine system. So, we have 2 stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, we secrete. So we can measure some of that in using a 24-hour urine sample that we took from the children. And we just were interested in the emotional development of the children. And part of what we looked at is how kids respond emotionally when their parents are teaching them something new, and how their parents teach them, and so on. So one of the surprising findings was when we looked at the amount of stress hormones that the child was secreting in the urine, male and female children, that we could measure how happily married or unhappily married the parents were. So we could either ask the parents how happy they were and use a questionnaire,
or you could just have their kids be in a cup.
or we could look at the child's stress hormones in the urine. So the kids are carrying around their parents' conflict with one another. And a guy named Mark Cummings at the University of Notre Dame has studied this, and looking at babies and looking at parents arguing with one another. And sure enough, kids at very early age, when adults are fighting around them, their blood pressure increases, the velocity of their blood increases. So they're very sensitive. Even 3-month-old babies are very sensitive to conflict. So when we studied 3-month-old babies interacting with their parents with 3 cameras looking at faces and measuring heart rate in the babies, we actually could see that when the parents were angry with one another, that transferred to the infant and affected the baby's heart. And so the baby gets hurt by this conflict, has a lot of trouble focusing attention. So a lot of attention deficit disorder could be spillover from the conflict that the parents are having.
That is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So what are the things that couples in a healthy or a good relationship do that would help keep that stress hormone down?
So we discovered the secret of what parents could do to buffer their children from their own stress and from stresses in general. We call it emotion coaching. And what emotion coaching turned out to be, we learned from these families who did it, was that there were certain families that really listened to their kids' feelings. When their kid was upset, about anything, they saw it as an opportunity for teaching or for getting close to their kid. And some parents, when their kids got angry or something like that, they get punishing toward their kids. Say, well, stop being angry, Or they try to comfort their child so the child would, or distract the child so the child wouldn't be sad or wouldn't be afraid. But these coaching parents, they were like football coaches in a way, but they were coaching about emotion. So they did 5 things, and those 5 things were really easy for Julie and I to teach parents, and we ran parents group, and they really work. They're very powerful at helping kids develop emotional intelligence, and they buffer kids from marital conflict as well. And they're very simple. They were really viewing the child's emotion, even small emotions, as an opportunity to connect or teach. And really trying to understand the child's emotion and trying to communicate empathy. Even if there was misbehavior, they might say something like, it's not okay to have kicked your brother's blocks down when you were mad at him, but I can see why he made you mad, because sometimes he makes me mad too. Well, let's talk about how to deal with your anger when you're mad at your brother, right? So they problem solve, they set limits, and they were understanding. And rather than dismissing the emotion of the child, they kind of zoomed in and did this emotion coaching. And as we followed the kids from age 3 to age 8, those kids, if you took 2 kids at age 3 and you measure their IQ, which is what we did. The kid who was emotion coached had much higher achievement at age 8 than the kid of the same IQ who was not emotion coached.
Wow.
And the secret was, when you understand your feelings, and that's what emotion coaching did, it's much easier to focus your attention in school. So these kids were able to self-soothe and focus their attention when it was required. And so they achieved more. They were able to use their IQ to much more effect than the kids whose emotions were dismissed.
I love that.
That's what we discovered. And we have a book that we wrote about this called Raising an Emotionally Intelligent Child.
Awesome. Get the book. For those of you guys who haven't read every book in the last 20 years, get the book. Julie, I want to come back to a little bit the clinical side of this question. I know there are couples who struggle with raising kids. Just takes a toll on your marriage. It's exhausting. It's rewarding, but I think it's also got its own special set of challenges. And every so often, a family is blessed with children who might have like hypersensitivity, or they might have some special needs or challenges that they face, and that can take an extra toll on a marriage. So in a scenario like this, what advice as a clinician would you have for parents in that situation where they really want to nurture that marriage, but their kids require extra attention beyond what maybe the typical kid would require?
Well, they have to stay, first of all, very, very open to one another, talking to one another about what they're feeling, what they're experiencing. So, for example, with kids with special needs, people get exhausted. They're tired, they're frustrated, sometimes they're despairing, they're hopeless. Other times they have great triumphs, wonderful successes, and they really want to celebrate that. So it's really, really important for parents to be communicating with one another, for example, having what we call a stress-reducing conversation, maybe every night, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that after the kids have gone to bed, where you're just saying, okay, what were the highs of your day and the lows of your day? Tell me about it. And not problem solving. That's the interesting thing. We learn this from really successful couples. In those conversations, what works the best, unless problem solving is really the goal of the conversation, what that person is asking for, oftentimes what the person wants is empathy. They want to be a focus of attention, they want to be listened to, they really want to be understood at a deeper level so they feel less alone with the joy and the stresses of raising a child who is very, very special and very unique, but also brings different challenges into the family. So really connecting about that, talking about that every day, texting about it several times a day if you need to, reaching out for help to other people. That's also really important.
Yeah, build your community around you.
Having that community, having that village, as they say, to raise the child is really important. Pulling in all the resources you can, and really working hard. A special needs child in a family where one child may be special needs and maybe 1 or 2 or 3 other kids are not, is difficult because that one child may be like, have a very strong gravitational pull. They pull the attention out of the parents, and it's harder to give attention to the kids who don't have those special needs. And then those kids begin to feel a little competitive, or they may feel left out. Yeah. And so it's important also for each parent to have special time with the other kids too, to try to make time for that. So those kids also feel attended to, seen, understood, talked to about their own responses to the child who is special in the family, and to really bring the family together as a community with not just the special needs child in the center of it all, but as a participant in that whole community of family.
That's great advice. I could sit here and listen to the two of you talk all night.
Okay.
No, unfortunately, our time's getting short here, but I just want to ask you one last question. And it might be too vague, but I just feel compelled to ask it. If you could leave us all with one message or one thought, one takeaway for the evening, is there any particular bit of advice or counsel or guidance that you would like to offer my big family here?
Yeah, I've got one. So, when reporters used to ask me, to summarize 45 years of research in one sentence, I used to think, that's really hard to do, but as I thought about it, I thought it was really actually a very good question. It's kind of like your question, and I think that the basic thing that really makes for a great relationship is the motto that when your partner is upset, the world stops and you listen.
That's a good one.
That is a great one.
Yeah. I think mine would be to go home and tell your partner exactly what you are grateful for in that partner. Say thank you. Tell them what they're doing right, not what they're doing wrong. Tell your partner what you really love and appreciate, the small things and the big things about who they are and what they've taught you, what they've given you.
I love that. Well, thank you both so much for being here at date night. Did you guys enjoy yourselves?